Thanks for being here. We appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to having a great celebration of the 35th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Could you stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, to start the program, we have a short video for you all to watch, and then we'll turn it over to two of our education leaders in Reagan education and one of our special guests to tell you about his experiences as the Berlin Wall fell 35 years ago tomorrow.
The Berlin Wall, which stood in Germany for 28 years, was a powerful symbol of oppression and division. It was a barrier separating East Berlin from West Berlin, and its main purpose was keeping East German citizens who were living under Soviet communism from escaping to a free West Germany. Nick Seraphim saw what it was like in East Germany firsthand.
I've seen the wall on the eastern side, of course, but it was a sad thing because, just dividing the same people and all this tension, and it's just a sad thing looking at that in the middle of a city.
Thousands of East German troops marched out of their barracks and in the dead of night, backed by Soviet forces, built the Berlin Wall. Changes have included the addition of guard towers, tank stops, razor-sharp metal fences, floodlights, ditches, and dog runs. The wall itself is now 12 feet high, concrete, and painted white so that anyone climbing it will make an easy target. Yet over the years, one thing hasn't changed. It is this: although the wall surrounds West Berlin, it is not West Berliners who are its prisoners. As one West German newspaper put it the morning after the wall went up, yesterday, East Berlin was officially transformed into one immense concentration camp. But it takes more than walls and guns to imprison the human spirit.
The wall was called the Iron Curtain because it restricted freedom of movement during what was then known as the Cold War. Despite the wall, over 5,000 people tried to flee to West Germany. More than 140 were killed during their attempted run to freedom.
And I saw, as I have before, that people have put up small crosses on the free side of the wall, memorials to those who were killed trying to get over. On one side, the death strip. On the other, memorials to those who fell crossing it. No place on earth can you see more clearly the contrast between the prison that is communism and the spirit of liberty that lives in all of humanity. They are the focus of evil in the modern world. To ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
The Cold War was the rivalry and the arms race between two superpowers, the United States and its respective allies, against the Soviet Union. It was democracy versus Soviet communism.
Their determination that their goal must be the promotion of world revolution and a one world socialist or communist state, whichever word you want to use. Now, as long as they do that, and as long as they at the same time have openly and publicly declared that the only morality they recognize is what will further their cause, meaning they reserve unto themselves the right to commit any crime, to lie, to cheat, in order to attain that, and that is moral, not immoral. And we operate on a different set of standards. I think when you do business with them, even at a détente, you keep that in mind.
I wanted peace through strength, not peace through a piece of paper. I decided we had to send a powerful message to the Russians that we weren't going to stand by anymore while they armed and financed terrorists and subverted democratic governments.
President Reagan believed in diplomacy and also firmly believed in peace through strength. He led the push for the modernization of America's armed forces and rallied the free world against the Soviet Union with other leaders, such as Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher of the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney of Canada, and Pope John Paul II who later became a saint.
The United States believes that respect for human rights is not social work. It is not merely an act of compassion. It is the first obligation of government and the source of its legitimacy. It also is the foundation stone in any structure of world peace. During my watch as president, there was nothing I wanted to do more than lessen the risk of nuclear war. For 40 years, nuclear weapons had kept the world under a shadow of terror.
President Reagan strongly believed in technological advances to defend the United States. One such project was the Strategic Defense Initiative, known as SDI.
What if free people could live secure in the knowledge that their security did not rest upon the threat of instant U.S. retaliation to deter a Soviet attack, that we could intercept and destroy strategic ballistic missiles before they reached our own soil or that of our allies? I know this is a formidable technical task, one that may not be accomplished before the end of this century. Yet current technology has attained a level of sophistication where it's reasonable for us to begin this effort. Since the dawn of the atomic age, we've sought to reduce the risk of war by maintaining a strong deterrent and by seeking genuine arms control. Deterrence means simply this: making sure any adversary who thinks about attacking the United States or our allies or our vital interests concludes that the risks to him outweigh any potential gains. Once he understands that, he won't attack. We maintain the peace through our strength.
President Reagan's SDI plan forced the Soviet Union to accelerate its own research and threw greater funding into its military programs. The Soviet economy couldn't keep up. His diplomatic efforts also helped foster a relationship between himself and Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. They met at 4 summits, where the two leaders worked together to forge a better understanding between the two countries and to reduce nuclear weapons with the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Still in the midst of the Cold War on June 12, 1987, President Reagan traveled to the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin to give an historic speech with a profound message that still resonates today.
For we believe that freedom and security go together, that the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
George Shultz was President Reagan's Secretary of State throughout much of the Cold War.
Tear down that wall was a statement that went beyond the wall itself and meant your system must change, so change it.
Speechwriter Peter Robinson says there was much discussion within the administration about taking the "tear down this wall" phrase out of the president's speech. He recounted his meeting with President Reagan.
I learned when I was in Berlin that depending on weather conditions, people will be able to hear your speech on the other side, the communist side, maybe even as far east as Moscow. Mr. President, is there anything in particular you want to say to the people on the communist side of the wall? And Ronald Reagan thought for a moment, and then he said, well, there's that passage about tearing down the wall. That's what I want to say to them. That wall has to come down. And that was all. Then the speech went out to staffing. And for 3 weeks, the National Security Council, the State Department, everybody fought it. We tend to remember Ronald Reagan correctly as the most genial, the warmest, the loveliest of men. What we sometimes forget is how aggressive he was. And so here we have, this is June of 1987, Gorbachev is in power. They've had the summit in Reykjavik, and the State Department argument is, wait a minute, everything's coming our way. Lay off the guy. And Ronald Reagan said, no, no, no. The Berlin Wall is still there. That system is still evil. I'm pressing my advantage. You're serious about perestroika? Tear down this wall. There's only one way out of this for you. That was Ronald Reagan. He wasn't going to go all sweet.
Ed Meese was one of President Reagan's closest aides.
He was always concerned about giving hope to the people of the captive nations, and he felt that's why tearing down the wall was symbolic, not only in his speech, but in terms of how it would affect people in all of those countries which were being oppressed by the Soviet Union.
Freedom and security go together. That the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace.
The fall of the Berlin Wall came only 2 years after President Reagan's historic speech at the Brandenburg Gate. November 9th, 1989 is an important moment in world history, as it symbolized the end of the Cold War and the reunification of East and West Germany. It also inspired other freedom movements around the globe and led to the collapse of other communist regimes.
It's still trust but verify.
The Berlin Wall's demolition and President Reagan's peace through strength policy throughout his presidency was a triumph of freedom over tyranny.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you're here to join us today, the 8th. Couldn't have you here on the 9th, but glad that you're here today. I'm here joined with Nick, and Nick, you might have seen him at the start of our video. Nick helped us restore our piece of the Berlin Wall that you guys all walked past today. But more than just restoring the Berlin Wall, Nick grew up behind the Iron Curtain and grew up under communism. And today we just want to have a little bit of a discussion with Nick so that you can hear from him what life was like and what this wall meant to people and what it coming down meant, not just to the people of Berlin, but really all of Eastern Europe. So, Nick, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, as a teenager growing up under communism, you really weren't much different age than the people we have here today. So, what was childhood like growing up under communism?
Well, for sure it was very different than what you guys have. Because it was under the system that you just saw the video. People were scared, oppressed, not much information. Most of the information was whatever the government will tell you. And no internet or cell phones, so you can imagine one at your age kind of growing, wants to grow, wants to develop, wants to know, wants to explore. That was pretty much a no.
Wow. Well, you were lucky, though. You had other experiences that allowed you to travel the communist world, which is something that most people weren't allowed to travel at all. Can you share with us how you were able to travel and what things you were able to see?
Yeah, so I was in folklore dancing in Eastern Europe's pretty big. And I was in one of those groups that actually would travel with official delegations to other countries. Of course, all the Eastern Bloc, which was, like you watched the wall that was in Berlin, but that invisible wall was pretty much between the West and the East. So within the Eastern Bloc, we would travel, which was quite a bit of an experience anyways, because nobody would get out of the country at that time at all. So I had a chance, younger than you, to take a glimpse of the eastern side of the wall, from a distance, of course, but then, it triggers in your head, like, why, what's behind, and all these things. And, as you grow later, more and more, you think about it. And things start changing in my 20s, as far as knowing more what's on the other side.
right. Wow. Well, you mentioned these things, no internet, no cell phones, how incredible. What did teenagers do for fun at your age? What did people do for fun?
We were able to watch some old westerns between cowboys and Indians, so they were, half were Indians, half of them the cowboys. And of course we played, bicycle. I actually, I've been in the arts since very early. And so, the art college, the art academy, they came later, but I was going to there were private classes for ceramics and drawings and things. So my mind was very much into it for a long time.
Right. Now, Will, I understand you had...
I did. You were in Bulgaria, and you got to travel more than most.
More
people.
than most.
Absolutely. You said you made it to East Berlin, and you got to the wall. How close were you able to get, and what did it feel like?
We were on quite a distance because it was kind of guided delegation with a bus, so they stopped for a second there, but it was on a distance, for sure. I've never experienced what was for the Eastern Berliners living there and all their miserable life, but like I said, even at that early age, we kind of knew. One gets the feeling that something's not right.
Absolutely.
Just to have a division between. In the end of the day, we're all people, and it's best to know what happened, so that you know not to repeat mistakes.
Absolutely.
Mistakes repeat.
So you were there, and did the communist governments ever say why they built this wall? What was their rationale?
Oh yeah, well, of course they would say, we're just better and good, and we gotta stay protected, and what's on the other side is there is no progress in it.
Yeah.
So that was pretty, even my generation kind of things start changing toward my 20s, but my parents, they pretty much lived their entire mature life into a system that will just tell you otherwise than what it is.
In one of your conversations, you talked about that system, and you said sometimes people just disappeared. They got disappeared. Can you explain that?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, when you're in such a system, there is no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of expression whatsoever. If you're like me, an artist, you cannot really go modern or explore. It's kind of, you're guided. And so if somebody dares, you're not going to see them no more.
So
basically, so it's terrifying because people were scared. One would say there was no crime and zero crime, basically, because nobody would dare do anything. So.
Could you speak out at all? Did you have to be worried about every word you would say that somebody might turn you in if you said something critical of the government?
You had to be worried. I mean, my grandparents were different. They are before that system, and they kind of never. They would be quiet. They're not going to speak about it or against it, but they will never accept it. And then, if you have your close family, you can talk and, express yourself, but not really, because you never know that you might say something to somebody that you don't expect might come next. So it was pretty closely watched.
In school, did they teach, we would call it maybe brainwashing, trying to be able to say this system, the communist system, is the best?
Well, that's all they would teach, yes, of course. They probably even rewrite history from facts that, like I said, from my grandparents, I would know other things, I see other books. But that was rare too, because I mean, they cleaned up pretty good, even the books, I'm sure.
Of course, of course.
Now, President Reagan and some of his cabinet members talk about the Eastern Bloc as the captive nations, that they were somehow captives of the Soviet Union. And the way you speak about freedom of expression and freedom of speech, or the lack thereof, do you think people's minds were captured by this as well? Do you think they were, how did this system affect somebody's mind just going about daily life?
Well, that's what propaganda does. I mean, they, like I said, I'm pretty sure even history got rewritten once they got into power. And so, you know, people will just struggle. That's the bottom line. I mean, and like I said, because it stayed for so long time,
Right.
you know, it takes generations to change things. At my age, we all had to speak Russian.
Right.
Of course, I speak it.
You bring that up. Did people have resentment for that they weren't supposed to speak their own language for you, but Bulgarian?
No, we don't have to speak Russian
Okay,
instead of
okay.
our language.
Okay.
It's like a second language. But it was at the schools.
Yeah. Wow. Now, I wonder, you talk about how people kind of struggled together, and that's something I think when people are struggling, they tend to band together. I'm wondering, the wall, it was only in Berlin.
Correct.
But how did the rest of communist Eastern Europe feel about the wall? Did they feel that they were in the same struggle as the people of Berlin?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Berlin probably because the war ended there, and, you know, you had on both sides basically armed troops. It wasn't like that in the rest of Europe, but the mentality and the system, everything was, you know, all these other countries, they had their own concentration camps anyways. You don't have to have the actual wall and the guard pointing in you, but if something goes wrong, you disappear and you get sent.
Wow.
So.
I couldn't imagine that. Well, you were a young man in 1989, eventually, when the wall came down, or you were a teenager. Where were you, and how did the people around you react to the wall coming down?
Yeah, so when the wall came down, I was young, but I was in the army for a couple of years, so I was in the art academy, and as busy as I can. Everybody got on the streets just like you saw on the video before that. You don't have to be in Berlin to actually try to chisel down that wall. Then, I mean, the celebration was like, the whole Eastern Bloc was already completely exhausted and tired. I'm sure there is a lot of the population that really lived underneath the system that probably never realized why we got to change things. But that's really the ones that got brainwashed and joined the party and lived for a very long time underneath it, so they couldn't associate themselves with anything else.
Right. That was the entire.
But anybody that was even older than me, they were pretty much done with it. Just couldn't wait.
So it was a celebration.
It was a celebration.
Yeah, because we see all these videos of these people climbing on the wall and tearing it down.
Yeah.
I mean, people took to the streets and they were celebrating.
Oh yes, I mean, I'm pretty sure the whole Eastern Europe.
Wow, how incredible that is.
One giant party.
Yeah.
One giant party, exactly.
But yet, the communist regimes had not completely collapsed by that point. But this was kind of the people showing that they were ready and wanted to be free.
Correct. I mean, probably a lot of the mentality even still exists today, although nowadays the whole Europe, the whole world actually changed. Not to mention, again, internet, all this stuff that was not there, not available back at the time. And I'm sure there's still a lot of people that probably think the old ways. You know, Bulgaria, I come from, it's NATO now. Like I said, very different. You can travel anywhere, do anything you want to do. But it's good to know what it was, so that, because these things, they don't just happen like 30-some years ago, and then you don't know about it, because it can happen again.
Right.
Absolutely.
As President Reagan always used to say, we're never more than one generation away from losing our freedoms and for our freedoms to go extinct. And I'm sure in Bulgaria it happened very quickly that freedom was taken overnight almost.
Oh yes, they just to assassinate the king, and pretty much game over.
Once he's gone.
Once he's gone, then others move in.
Right, and it can happen like that overnight. It can happen.
So as an artist, one of your jobs is doing restoration. And if you all haven't been here for a while, when we go out in a few minutes and look at the Berlin Wall, you really have to look at it because it has changed. Can you tell them about the restoration that you all did?
Yes, so first when we got invited, I was doing it with Carolyn McLeod. She's a conservator, very respected. And we worked together, and of course we work on a lot of, I've been in restoration in historical building and places for a long time with different companies. But this particular piece of the wall, it's, as you can imagine, very special to me. And so what we wanted to do is for once to restore exactly as close as possible to what it was. Because, you know, it's out on the sun. It was been likely just sprayed graffiti at the time. You know, it fades, like everything else. And then there was a different person that about a decade ago or something like that came and refreshed it. Good artist, stage person, but not a conservator. So our idea was first to get it as close as possible to as it was brought here originally, and then to use materials to protect it for UV and like as long as it can last. Yeah. But incredible pleasure for me doing this, coming from the other side of the wall, and then 30 some years later, as an artist, you can actually go on the west side and do something about it.
It's poetic. It's
right.
Poetic, and
You did.
So, yeah, absolutely.
And it's also so visual. When you get out there and look at it, how bright the colors are now, what it would have been like when it was first taken down to try and be able to do that.
So, one final. You had never seen the other side of this wall.
I've never seen the other side.
Did you expect there to be artwork? What did you?
There were rumors, yeah. I mean, there was, you know, for one, you imagine, because, you know, like I said, like once I was almost in my 20s before, like 18 to 20, we had a lot more information coming in for different ways. Okay. But I've never seen it. You know, you can only dream about it.
Right. And it must have been a dream.
It was a dream, but it's one of those that you almost never think it's going to come true.
Right.
You just dream quietly.
Yeah, don't tell anybody or you'll disappear.
Anyway.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So wow, how touching, I can imagine. Well.
Absolutely. Before we head out, I'd like to pause just for a moment and thank Nick for coming and sharing his experiences with us today. If you'd give him a round of applause.
Hey,
try and be able to
thank
do that.
you for being here.
Before we go outside, I want you to stop and think about walls. Walls have been a big part of world history. Over 2,700 years ago, the Chinese built the Great Wall. The Romans built Hadrian's Wall in England to try and be able to keep out attackers. But the Berlin Wall was very different. It wasn't trying to keep people out, it was trying to keep them in, trying to keep them from being able to get to the freedoms that existed on the other side. And walls still exist today. Walls are out there between North and South Korea, between Israel and Gaza, and even here between the United States and Mexico. In some parts of that boundary, there are walls. But I'd like you to stop and think for a minute, especially about what the walls mean to the people on both sides, why they're put up, what they indicate about their beliefs and their cultures to try and be able to do that. Because what we're going to have you do in a couple of minutes is we're going to go out and take a look at the wall again. And when we go out there, we're going to want you to try and maybe look at it with fresh eyes and try and kind of come up with what does it mean to you. You've learned some more today, hopefully a little bit more information to try and be able to analyze it, but also what it means in terms of freedom. As Jonathan said, President Reagan used to say, we're never more than one generation. That's like 20 to 25 years away from losing our freedom. So what do you how important are your freedoms to you? What are you willing to do to make sure that we stay a free country, that you keep your freedoms? But also, President Reagan talked about freedom is a universal, or that's what we hope it would be. And there are billions of people who don't have the freedoms that we have here. What are we going to do to try and be able to help other people achieve freedom, and those who have it to be able to keep it, to try and be able to do that? So what I'm hoping is, I'm looking up at the screen, they're going to bring up a QR code, and you all got your phones, I'm hoping. They didn't take them away? No? Yep. If you could scan, hopefully it's going to be up here in just a second, scan that QR and take a look at the 2 questions that we're going to ask you. Because as we move you up there, what we'd like you to do is think about those and then write it. Go to the site and put in what you think. And what we're going to do is we're going to collect all of those. And if you're watching this online, we'd encourage you to do exactly the same thing. We're going to bring all of those comments together, all those observations together, and we'll send them out to your teachers so they'll be able to share them with you. But this is your chance to kind of reflect on what was happening.
And if you didn't get to scan it, I'll have some paper ones that you can scan on our way out and up to the wall. So I think that's about
I think that's it.
What I'm going to have us do is I'm going to lead us on out. If you guys would stand on up and follow me, we're going to walk on up to the Berlin Wall, and we're going to have a little bit of time to reflect on what it means.
As we're out here today, some of you, I think most of you have probably been here before. Would I be correct? Who's been here before? Yeah, like everybody. Well, for those of you who haven't been here, welcome. This is a real piece of the Berlin Wall that was brought here when this library was under construction. It arrived here in about 1990. And as you could tell from this really colorful side, this is the side of Nick's wonderful restoration work. He came in and made it so that we could enjoy these images of freedom for generations to come. And if you take a close look at the wall, you'll see a butterfly and the word freedom and these flowers. I take that I understand that as those are symbols of freedom. The butterfly is a free creature. It kind of goes about and does what it likes. And the word freedom here, very powerful. But in just a moment, I'd like to invite you all up to the wall so that we can have a moment of reflection. As we're standing here today, enjoying the sweet sunlight and the warm breeze and maybe some chirps of beautiful birds, we're enjoying our own freedom. But there's so many people here in this world that still don't have those same freedoms. And I'd like you to, now would be the time, come on up with me, and you're allowed, this is something you're allowed to touch. Please come on up and approach the wall. Make a big old circle around it. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Denner. Come on over and make a big circle here, and you could touch this wall. Maybe not the painting side, but come make a contact with this wall, because this is the wall that divided a city, divided the people, and divided loved ones and family members who at one point, one day, that fateful day in 1961, overnight that wall came up. People's families were stuck on one side, not able to get back to the other. And as we're here reflecting on what freedom means to us and enjoying the freedoms that we do have here today, I'd like you all to join me in a kind of a moment of silence and reverence and of respect for not just, the 140 plus people that died escaping this wall, but all those people still in the world today who don't have those freedoms that we enjoy and who are surely desperate to have just an ounce of what we have here today. So if you would join me in a moment of silence. All right. Well, as we've taken some time to reflect, I want you guys, if you've scanned our code and had a chance to get that up on your phone, and maybe if you haven't, that's fine. You could keep the papers and head on back to the bus with that. I'd like to ask you to write a bit of reflection. What does freedom mean to you? And what, as President Reagan said, are you going to do to defend freedom? Because I see it's never more than a generation away from extinction. We don't have it because we inherited it through the bloodstream from mom and dad. Every single generation must stand up to protect freedom, because if you don't stand up to protect it, no one else will do it for you. And wouldn't it be a shame if we were standing here in the United States one day and you're telling your children and your grandchildren about what life was like when America was free and what people were free? So in these moments, give us some thought about to that. But I would like to turn it over, and I have one final statement that I'd like Nick to come up here and read for me. This is a quote from President Reagan reminding us of the importance of this wall. If you would here, Nick, right on into the microphone.
Oh, done this way. And so he said, let our children and our grandchildren come here and see this wall and reflect on what it meant to history. Let them understand that only vigilance and strength will deter tyranny. Ronald Reagan.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you. Thank you for your time.